So, whoa, what the cluck is that? Have you been cooking eggs? You know 1 in 3 serial killers have consumed egg in their lifetime, right? And what, you're just gonna sit there and, here, have that back. Sit there and keep sizzling that protein pouch? Yeah, keep munching. Sick bastard. Illegal activities. Whether you love them, hate them, give too much of a shit about them, there is always a couple strands of law breaking in the haystacks of life. Oh, you're sitting down to enjoy an entry in the Five Nights at Freddy series? Yeah? Well, the next time you're flashing animatronics, keep in mind that there's some guy next to you cooking omelets with his crack cocaine. You want to be associated with that yokey shit? Well, some people do, hence the existence of illegal FNaF clones. Yeah, these ain't your grandma's fan games. Look, there's chicken feathers all over this. This kind of thing has always piqued my interest. The controversial community created tributes that were too risque, offensive, or 99% of the time just slightly too infringing of a project to not warrant the series creator issuing some kind of a takedown notice. While at the end of the day, the mortality rate of any piece of fan-created content rests entirely in the hands of the IP owner, traditionally, Five Nights at Freddy's fan games have had a pretty solid track record of sticking around without too much trouble for the most part. I don't think the Fazbear Fanverse initiative would exist if they weren't, but when some dairy farmer motherfucker out there decides to crack open trouble, oh, can you believe it's moderately interesting news? Cause hell, whether it's a FNaF fan game, something being passed off as a totally original product, a well-meaning tribute, or a malicious attempt at copyright infringement, there's gonna be a reason for interference of any official capacity. So I figured I'd scoop up the most notorious examples of this. Not a cop, just a nosy piece of shit. Five Nights at Freddy's 3, Five Nights at Freddy's 3, what list of illegal FNaF clones would be complete without it, is, get this, a sequel to Five Nights at Freddy's 2. Yeah, it's one of them. Released by BFP Films 424 in late 2014, the thing was a fan-made, cobbled-together amalgamation of stolen assets and mechanics, both official and community-produced. Scrambled eggs! If not made known for its unapologetic rehashing of FNaF 1 and 2's resources, it was for featuring the infamous Sugar the Cat, a straight-up rebrand of popular FNaF fangame developer Emil Mako's Candy the Cat, stolen renders and all. And this was well before the release of both an official Five Nights at Freddy's 3 and Mako's own Five Nights at Candy's, the latter partially developed specifically to combat frequent unpermitted use of the Candy the Cat character, just like this. Now listen, I'm not saying this thing was the catalyst, just heavily implying it and hoping you get the idea. Otherwise, the game itself was a pretty unremarkable feat in isolation, like, ooh, it's an asset-flipped fangame released in late 2014, like, yeah, that was terrifying 9 years ago, but it's 2023? It's only slightly traumatizing now. Regardless, after some concerned emails to series creator Scott Cawthon and some community backlash, Five Nights at Freddy's 3 quickly became Five Nights at Freddy's 3 fan-made before Cawthon's official intervention had the game ultimately rebranded to The Return to Freddy's, what would act as the pioneer to one of the most controversial FNaF fangame series known to modern man. It's definitely a fangame that lives on through legacy alone, as far as I can tell, it's been more or less scrubbed clean from the internet by now, but hey, anybody who's anybody knows going for the fake FNaF 3 is like shouting at water for being the common denominator in oil spills. It's weak sauce. And while I've definitely got some far more devious bad actors stacked up for later, why don't we up the ante a little with Jolly. Jolly, created and led by Ivan G, exists as an anomaly in space and time, not only in that it actually came to fruition as a fully fledged fangame, and not only in that it was relatively successful, garnering a bit of its own cult following with its first entry, but in that Jolly was eventually expanded into a catch-all descriptor for a whole-ass multi-saga 7-year spanning fangame series consisting of 8 total entries, almost all of which, from what I gather, are relatively sound bouts. Taking cues, inspiration, and mechanics from Five Nights at Freddy's sister location, of course I never got within 500 feet of this fucking thing, but I respect those who did. Split across 2 sagas, the Jolly and Jolly Bees sagas respectively, the series, ultimately, was derivative of actual Filipino-based fast food chain Jollibee's. Oh no, Mackey's was taken. Ergo, a portion of the assumedly haunted animatronics the games do feature did adopt the likeness of the chain's mascot, the anthropomorphic bee himself, all the way from the release of the first game in late 2016 up to the work-in-progress Jolly 4, the final entry in the Jolly saga and the series as a whole. And hell, with such a mark left on the Five Nights at Freddy's community after all that time, and the amount of positive reception it had received, apparently the thing was even being considered for the Fanverse initiative. before the actual Jollibee's brand stepped in August of 2020, and yeah, that's a dozen, stick 'em. Yeah, seeing as Jolly never crossed the boundary into infringing on the Five Nights at Freddy's brand, at least no more than your typical fan tribute, being a lesser known chain, it was only when attention was called to the base IP that these games existed that things began to go awry, with Cawthon made aware of the issue, allegedly dropping the project from consideration for the fanverse. Now, I highly doubt that there was any genuine malice at play here. From what I understand, Jolly absolutely ended up crafting its own identity within the confines of a FNaF fangame through its games, story, characters, even an attempted series of novels, and Ivan G certainly has seemed to leave an impact on the Freddy's fan community. I legitimately believe it was just a nonchalant decision to associate the first entry with a real-world restaurant brand that later came around to sting him in the ass when things really began to take off. Bzz, like a bee. I mean, it was not an uncommon practice, with the simplistic and easy to adapt Five Nights at formula erupting in popularity in tandem with the initial boom of intrigue those original Five Nights at Freddy's games had. It was a no-brainer that in the sea of fan games there were bound to be some pre-existing IPs among the waves, of which a couple outliers were bound to just get a tad too popular for their own good. In the case of the Jollibee's brands, like, these guys get around, it's a multi-regional business. But at the same time, as a significantly smaller deal than the likes of Mackey's or Disney or Wario, Jollibee's has a lot more to lose, which is why you'll see a horror game series painting your relatively small fry franchise in a bad light get the axe, while Five Nights at Treasure Island, arguably a definitively more offensive take on conglomerate Disney, stick around. It's all about the relative damage your fan project could pose to a company. But as far as Jolly stands today, while the games existing within the Jollibee saga were ultimately removed from GameJolt, listings for the OG Jolly saga still remain, suggesting the reason for the takedowns was purely down to the more recent entries simply sharing a namesake with the chain, and that otherwise, it's possible the brand was lenient enough to just consider the original saga transformative and to leave it be. Or they really just didn't give a shit unless the game was directly linked to Jollibee's by name. I love loopholes. Well, that was bleak, but hey, as far as crimes go, it feels like the further we stray from the core Five Nights at Freddy's IP, the longer we can operate on the black market. These babies ain't hatching themselves, I'm trying anything at this point. So, in tow of blurring the line that much further between fangame and game, Case Animatronics is the closest interactive experience to crossfading I've ever witnessed. The shell of an original game with the heart of really wanting to be FNaF, it's great. In essence, Case Animatronics, developed by Walnut Limited Liability Company and Last Level, is the 3D Five Nights at Freddy's free roam experience everybody and their mother couldn't seem to want enough back in 2015. Stuck in a police station with killer animatronics on the loose, backgrounds lore to decipher, and a flashlight and portable security monitor within arm's reach to age you till 6 AM, oh wait, no, sorry, I mean it's inspired by Outlast. It's got hiding mechanics, that sets it apart. Free roam, what now? I'd be hard-pressed to admit that this doesn't wear its inspiration on its sleeve, and at a time where free roam fan games like The Joy of Creation and Whatever Your Mum Vomited Up in Unity were already available on GameJolt for nothing but a spit shake, it's understandable that people got a little unwieldy at the sight of what was very much presented as a full-price fan game that barely differentiated itself from the standard of what fans had been developing for free. Especially when it felt like it really wasn't even doing very much to set apart its robotic enemies from not only pre-established official designs, but possibly even fan-made designs as well. Yeah, I'm wandering into accusatory central here, but come on, the drawings on the metal casings of these guys and the entire design philosophy of the cats. If you're at all familiar with the Five Nights at Candy's games, it's easy to notice some similarities here, especially considering that the animal cast Case proudly presents doesn't seem to have much of a consistent theme in the critters it does base its antagonists on, almost as if the developers picked out whatever the piss they felt was most relevant at the time. Yeah, we got a wolf, an owl, a cat, and an animatronic panda bear, with Panda doing so much of the heavy lifting here, it's no wonder they're going extinct. But hey now, you might be asking, well Gomo, you stupid bitch, the wolf and owl sport some pretty standard and uninspired designs. I think you're taking this a little too far. And to that I say, well yeah, the game had its own Golden Freddy or something, I'd agree, but unfortunately, the game had its own Golden Freddy. While the internet would never lie to me, Case Animatronics, at least as far as its early 2015 build suggested, was unapologetically a FNaF clone, from its mechanics to its character designs, hell, arguably down to the name of the antagonist. A man by the name of Scott who created the animatronics you're pit up against, of which each and every offending element here was a deciding factor in inviting the actual Scott to drop a DMCA, forcing Case to remove any remnant of the bear but surprisingly not a whole lot else. Yeah, despite the glaring similarities between Case and Freddy's, the game actually saw a full release in August of 2016, with a good chunk of its original vision preserved. To a whole lot of the Steam reviews are mostly positive, and I'm sure that, all things considered, it could have been worse. Just that apparently the game's kinda broken to all hell sometimes, but it's fine, it's legal, just wouldn't recommend it to anybody with a dairy allergy. But even if Case ended up getting to release at all, like it wanted to, even spawning a sequel to call its own, it's still a really interesting situation, right? Even post-DMCA, it's not like the game was stripped of all its FNAF-inspired content, only the elements that directly infringed on Cawthon's copyrighted material, and hey, he even wanted to help meddle as little as possible to make sure the game had the chance to see the light of day, while staying in its own lane. So my question is, how close to copying all of FNAF do you need to get in order to almost see death himself? Answer, copying all of FNAF. The Dolls, another 2016 release. I'm forgetting why I listed this one again. Developed by Hush Interactive and brought to us by Forever Entertainment. Oh boy! I'd really love to try and describe this thing to you, but is there really a whole lot to say? The gameplay speaks for itself. These visuals are clipping my speakers. You've been hired as the night watchman to watch over an abandoned doll factory, ultimately tasked with fending off pesky, haunted bee people, equipped with cameras, doors, lights, 5 nights, a power system to keep track of. That's a one-up on Case. But you know, at least Case had the decency to host a page on Game Jolt, you know, the mother gum of which all FNAF fan games bud from. Dolls jumped straight to Steam, and I can't honestly give you any kind of opinion here that isn't completely indifferent or pointing out the obvious. It's got a rusted lo-fi aesthetic, something I always appreciate, but like, I'll just go and play Silent Hill if I want that, man. Yeah, you could muddy the waters a little by saying, well, the enemies are actually only similar on paper due to them both being animated lifeless figures. But if you have to get that specific to get that vague, you've already lost your egg baskets, you sunny side up sucking slut. I mean, seriously, the Dolls is so unabashedly a FNAF fan game that I've been splicing footage of actual FNAF fan games into the segment, and you probably didn't even notice. Long story short, people got upset and alerted Scott Cawthon, expecting a full takedown, but were met instead with a post of encouragement left by Cawthon on the Dolls' own Steam page. This guy wanted to help push the game to its full potential without having to ride off the coattails of Freddy's success, helping to build its own identity through nothing but minimal revisions, in his own words. So, after some internal reworks, the Dolls became the Dolls Reborn. It was different enough. I don't know if it was different enough for the people that played it, but sucking in or something. I really do think that if you're gonna steal from the best, don't do a shit job. Case Animatronics was met with considerably decent reviews, as yeah, it stunk of last week's egg salad, but it did utilize some of its own unique ideas to at least brand the thing as its own deal. The Dolls, for as interesting of a wet sock as it is, straight up belongs on a Game Jolt page with the FNAF fangame tag, standing as nothing more today than a legitimate case of permissible monetization for a Five Nights at Freddy's clone. Like, yeah, visually it's a tad less disgusting than the majority of fan games, but otherwise there doesn't seem to be a single redeeming factor here, most responses to the game labeling it bland, frustrating, confusing, and unchallenging. This guy was sent the game for free. Smash an egg on my head and give me salmonella poisoning, cause ow, and yikes. The Dolls was a flop in every which way imaginable, and I truly don't think it could have gone any other way, unless Hush were willing to restructure their game from the ground up. Less to say they had it coming, but as disappointing as the Dolls turned out to be, as devious of a trick as the Dolls was, what if I told you that there was a game out there, significantly more incriminating than anything I've listed here, claiming to be totally original, with origins rooted directly in nothing but a whole lot of this? I don't know, search up Five Nights at on the Google Play Store or something, lol. Yeah, truth is, there are hundreds, if not thousands of examples of games like this, like a sudden outbreak of monkeypox, and if you bet your ass there's some kind of cure, good luck taking a shit tonight. However, as infringing as each and every one of these little poo stains are, I don't know what, you want me to talk about these? It's like going after a field of wheat. You really gotta be armed with an angry bee's nest of a legal team to combat something like this though, and with just how lenient Cawthon's been in the past with actual individual threats to his IP, it really doesn't surprise me that the floodgates haven't been swung shut. It's an inevitability of life, really. FNAF hit it big, and with that is gonna come copycats, like most good things. The guy to first get into a car crash must be pissing in his grave. Now, that don't mean that the most notorious examples are the only examples. I could go all day here. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 open source, taken down for essentially acting as a free version of a paid game. Lego FNaF, practically a repackaged mod that does nothing but switch up the visuals. Endless Inside, it's a paid sister location fan game. It's not illegal, it just makes me heave. But as far as FNaF-inspired content goes, I don't think Cawthon's out for blood. Hell, with the existence of the Fazbear Fanverse initiative, I'd argue the opposite. He's a donor. And by that I mean he's literally paying people to make fan games. It sure is a business strategy. And while on paper that does open up some otherwise pretty unattainable opportunities for some folks, man does it fuzz up the lines between what counts as a tribute, official game, and cold-cut clone. My solution? There's a game out there, almost entirely original, that not only invokes the right kind of atmosphere of quote-unquote golden era FNaF, but manages to really craft something of its own, with its own mechanics, its own story, and just enough intrigue to draw people in for the long run. It's definitely a bit of an older survival horror, but one I definitely recommend to those looking for a title devoid of tasteless repackaging, and especially those interested in the whole sit-and-survive subgenre of horror games. It's Five Nights at Freddy's. Just go play the first game and quench your insatiable thirst, you egg-addicted shits.